I'm Dr. Cliff Jernigan, and I serve as the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and the Dean of Graduate Studies, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to what I am certain will be a very special occasion. The audio clip that you just heard was from a commencement address delivered by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. here at Hofstra in 1965. That was 50 years ago, and it was before the Voting Rights Act was signed. 50 years ago, Hofstra was proud and honored to have Dr. King speak here. Today, we are proud and honored to have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Bernice King. Joining us in conversation with Dr. King is the Executive Director of the Hofstra's NOAA program, the highly successful NOAA program. That director, the Executive Director, is Mr. Roosevelt Smith. You'll hear more about the NOAA program in a moment from Mr. Smith and Dr. Simmons, our provost. For his part, Mr. Smith is deeply committed to uplifting and guiding minority students. Mr. Smith is an alumnus of Hofstra and a proud member of the NOAA program, class of 1998. Always an advocate for NOAA students. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Roosevelt Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our conversation with Dr. Bernice King. Our theme this year is recognizing the legacy and success which represents a recognition of all those who've come before us and sacrifices inherent to keeping this program and Hofstra University alive and in existence. For the next 50 years, the NOAA program was founded by Hofstra University on a philosophical premise that educational opportunities should be provided to those who have historically been denied equal access to education. This philosophy of the NOAA program continues to support the greater educational pluralism and ethnic diversity of those who've been non-traditional students in the past. This commitment recognizes the need to provide for the economic and academic, political, and social conditions that facilitate success. Hofstra is committed to the development of academic, pre-professional, and professional programs, both graduate and undergraduate, that support the career aspirations of students and meet the needs of society. Particular attention is provided to fields related to medicine, engineering, technology, where there exists a desperate need for attention to underrepresented students. In addition to its primary educational mission, Hofstra University aspires to serve society by providing the university's resources for the solution of social problems and for the general enrichment of contemporary society. A clearly established priority of Hofstra University's NOAA program is to serve students who are severely disadvantaged economically and educationally, especially when little or no opportunity for post-secondary education exists. Hofstra is a pioneer in this mission, sponsoring the NOAA program since 1964, as it was one of the original institutions to join the New York State Higher Education Opportunity Program in 1969. The NOAA program is committed to the full-time enrollment of students, recognizing the development of skills in learning, thinking, and communicating are the foundations of all education. In this regard, the NOAA program provides a proud success for students with a high retention and graduation rate that exceeds the national average. This has been committed for the last 50 years. Please join me in a video about the program.
One word I've used to define the program is,
I would say, progressive, because it's ever changing. It's not the beginning and it's definitely not the end for it. The students who come in, the administrators, are forever changing the face of the program.
I think it's fierce because there's no backing down. It's a program that encourages success no matter what, and it's by any means necessary. While some people may fail, at the end of the day, we're trying to make the most successful students as possible.
I think it's an important program to have. And I choose that word because unfortunately a lot of people grow up not knowing the importance of education. And I think education is key to everything. It opens up so many doors, and a lot of people don't grow up learning that.
I've been working with the program for almost 40 years. And from day one, this is a program that has tremendously impressed me, and I think for two reasons. The commitment of the students to their education. They know the importance of the education. They work extremely hard to do as well as they possibly can. And what also impressed me was the huge dedication of the staff. Every one of the men and women who's worked at the NOAA program has been outstanding, working night and day to make sure these students have every opportunity to succeed.
More than part about working with the NOAA program has been the students and the development that you see for the students. You get an opportunity to see the students from when they come in as first-year students, fresh out of high school, to the walking across the stage, and many of the students who will request letters of recommendation to law school or to medical school, and also get an opportunity to actually be invited to some of those graduations at medical and law school as well.
It's like a family at my university. It's a place where I can go whenever I need assistance. I get the academic extra help I needed to adjust when I first was a freshman. There's a lot of programs that I get to be a part of exclusively due to the people that I meet through the NOAA program, and I've gotten the opportunity to get more involved because the upperclassmen have really helped me adjust and learn.
Some of the important factors that contribute to the success of the program, I definitely think, is peer mentorship. So in our summer program, students are actually the counselors that help the new students coming in, and I've done it ever since my freshman year. So I think that's an important element, and that our program is small, so it's very community-based. Our deans and our director is very close working with us, making sure we stay on top of our classes, making sure that we're being involved in extracurriculars, and I think that's a very important aspect, that home away from home feel.
I was like one of the only freshmen on the Hofstra Senate for this year, so it's really been an experience where I'm learning from a lot of the upperclassmen, and I wouldn't have got that from a lot of different universities.
The way that I embraced the opportunity that NOAA gave me is partaking in every experience I could at Hofstra University. My first semester, I got very involved socially through clubs and different leadership opportunities because I knew that I was given this grand opportunity to be at a school that I normally wouldn't be able to go to. So I wanted to get involved in early, and I wanted to do everything that I could while on campus.
I see the program expanding in the future and continuing to be a model for similar programs around the country.
I hope it excels. I hope that the program is used as, you know, a sort of template for other programs around the state, around the U.S., just because it's so important to offer education to students who can't afford it.
One of the greatest things I've learned by being a student in the NOAA program is confidence. And as simple as that sounds, it takes a long time for a lot of people to find that confidence in themselves. And during the summer program, they taught me to speak clearly, to speak with my head up, to believe in what I was saying, even if others didn't, because you have a lot to offer the world, and I learned that my message is just as important as anyone else's.
Thank you. As you can tell, we are committed to our NOAA program, and we are extremely proud of the program and the success it's had over the past 50 years. Our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs is the Chief Academic Officer at the university, Dr. Gail Simmons. She's also my boss. She has close to 20 years of experience as an academic administrator, and I was struck by how committed she is to underrepresented populations, and our commitment and her commitment sort of go very much hand in hand. At one of the first meetings, she made it clear that one of her primary objectives was to maintain a commitment to the highest quality educational experience, particularly for those from underserved populations. It is indeed my pleasure to present to you Dr. Gail Simmons.
Good afternoon. How you doing? Okay. It is on behalf of the entire Hofstra community, I'd really like to welcome you to this beautiful space, the John Cranford Adams Playhouse, for a conversation with Dr. Bernice A. King. We're thrilled, and I mean this sincerely, we're thrilled to have so many high school students from across Long Island and Queens and even out into New Jersey joining us for today's event. In the words of Dr. Bernice King, the pride and treasure of our nation is our youth. Any nation that neglects the teaching and the upbringing of its youth is a nation on the decline. And that's even truer today in a global community where you can make a difference not just locally, not just regionally, but not just nationally, but internationally if you have an education and you can have an impact on the world. Dr. King is the youngest daughter of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. She is an attorney, minister, activist for nonviolent social change, and CEO of the King Center, a nonprofit organization founded by her late mother after the assassination of her father in 1968. Dr. King is nationally and internationally known as a powerful, motivating, and life-changing public speaker. She challenges audiences and hopes to develop a nation of young people who will impact the global marketplace and transform the world culture with a nonviolence mindset. Since her first public speaking appearance at the age of 17 at the United Nations, she has spoken at the White House, major international corporations, prestigious universities, and various entities around the world, including in Europe, Africa, and Australia. Dr. King graduated from Spelman College with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and holds both a Master of Divinity and Juris Doctor from Emory University. She has also received an Honorary Doctor of Divinity from Wesley College and is currently a member of the State Bar of Georgia. It is my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Bernice A. King. Please join me in welcoming her. Dr. King.
Dr. King, on behalf of the entire Hofstra community, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us and to share with the students from Long Island and Hofstra as well.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We will begin with a question from Mr. Smith. I'll have a follow-up question. And when we ask the students to stand when you hear your name and your school, so that you can be recognized for your question, and we will proceed from that way forward. Time permitting, we will take questions from Hofstra University students in the audience. Mr. Smith, your question, please.
Dr. King, may you please explain to us your role as the CEO of the King Center, and what does that entail so some of the students and folks can know what you're
Well, I am the visionary of the King Center, and I manage the day-to-day affairs, primarily helping to guide and direct our staff in carrying out our vision. The center is devoted to educating and training individuals in my father's nonviolent philosophy, which we now call Nonviolence 365. And the reason we call it that is because my father taught nonviolence not merely as a tactic to use in a social justice movement or a political movement, but as a way of life. And so we do trainings with law enforcement, with students, with educators. We have people from the business community, from every, basically, walk of life. And that's the predominant work that we do on a daily basis. We also have other programs that we are developing now for a global summit on Martin Luther King Jr.'s leadership, which will be in 2017. And we are in the process of reconnecting all of the Martin Luther King Jr. Commissions that were established when my mother worked on helping to pass the King holiday. She also, at that time, lobbied for a federal holiday commission so that every state would be synchronized in the way in which they would celebrate my father's birthday. And that commission lasted for about 10 years, but some of the state commissions continued. And so now we are seeking to reconnect with them to create a network so we would have a footprint across the nation to further expand my father's teachings and work.
Would you share with us, Dr. King, what you see as some of the challenges and issues facing African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities in the years to come?
You know, I think we have a lot of common challenges, and if I had to capture what we perhaps face the most is a lack of unity in those challenges. And what I mean by that is I don't think we have yet come to a place where we understand that we face those common challenges and that in order to overcome them, we are going to have to create strategies and collaboration in order to face those challenges. I see a lot of fragmentation and a lot of silos.
Yes.
And one of the most powerful things about the movement that my father led is he was able to bring people together around common issues and common challenges. And we have to do that in the minority communities if we're going to overcome these challenges. There's a lot of tension right now between black and brown communities.
Yes.
But we don't realize that if we were to align, we could probably be one of the most powerful forces in our nation for social change. And it's my hope that we figure that out. I know there's small efforts here and there across the nation, but we have to see not each other as a threat, but we must see each other as brothers and sisters in a common struggle and forge forth ahead to deal with. Because when you look at the statistics in every arena, whether you're dealing with education, whether you're dealing with the legal system, the judicial system, health care, income, jobs, you name it, the disparity is great when you're talking about the white community versus the black community, the white community versus the Latino community. So we have that commonality, and how we're going to overcome those disparities, we have to join alliances and develop strategies, and we can't tackle everything at one time.
Yes.
That's the misnomer. Dr. King tackled one thing at a time.
Right.
And when he was in Montgomery, dealing with bus desegregation, there was obviously police brutality. There were obviously issues around voting rights. But he focused his attention and the citizens of Montgomery's attention on desegregating the buses.
Right.
And because they were able to do that, they were successful. And it created a momentum for other people across the nation to continue to challenge other issues of segregation in the South.
That's you actually captured some of the thoughts that students have asked in several of their questions. We have from Amanda Patton from Half Hollow, and Glendon Rollins from Progress, Nia Harper-Thomas from Progress, and Tatiana Montez, a first-year student here at Hofstra, and they wanted to know, what is your opinion on Black Lives Matter, that movement?
You know, that's a complicated question. And the reason I say that is it's very controversial. We all know that. I think the Black Lives Matter movement is the result, let me say that first, of the frustrated hopes and dreams of a generation who were expecting to see a different kind of society and who have now given up a sense of hope in that and feel like, as my father said, oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. Eventually the yearning for freedom manifests. And so this is a call and a cry that America has to get back to the business of really looking at those issues that disproportionately impact Black Americans. I think that movement has done a good job of bringing that front and center because we've ignored it for so long. Even some of us who represent the Black community have ignored those issues. And so from that perspective, I think it is very powerful. My hope and wish, but I'm not the one who began it, is that we would have said Black Lives Matter too. Because I think the issue is America has not understood that we are all important and valuable and should be treated with equity in this nation. And we have left behind so many in our nation. I think the statement has obviously polarized people, even within their own community.
That's true.
Those, who identify with Black Lives Matter. There's a polarization even in their own community. But we cannot deny the fact that we as African Americans have paid a dear price being in this country. I mean, we're the only, actually, in fact, the only race that came here against our will. We are the only race that has been enslaved on these grounds. And so there's a peculiar aspect to our struggle and our story that if America is going to be great, that America has to confront and deal with. And so I think it's important that that movement is here. I do think it needs a little bit more clarity and strategy, and plan of execution, because many people are, oftentimes confused with what's going on with the Black Lives Matter. What is their real platform? What is it that they're trying to accomplish? And so my hope and prayer is that at some point that clarity will come. The other issue has to do with decentralized leadership. I do think we're living in a time where there will not be a single leader. But the misnomer is that there was a single leader in the movement.
That's right.
And so we have to let people know that my father may have been one of the main leaders and the more prominent voice, but Andrew Young was a leader. Joseph Lowery was a leader. John Lewis was a leader. So the movement produced many leaders who came together. The difference is they had a great respect for my father's gifts and his prominence and his ability to corral people. And so they were able to serve and submit to his leadership, ultimately. And we don't do that well together today. And so I hope that there can be a leadership protocol at least established, because everything in the universe has a protocol. I mean, even when you look at nature, there's a protocol. And if there's no protocol, then you don't know at the end of the day what's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and you can end up with a lot of chaos. So if there's not a quote unquote central leader, there needs to be at least some kind of leadership protocol.
So you think that the Black Lives Matter movement would benefit from a more organized approach where you could actually identify leaders or leaders at particular aspects at the top of the movement with that?
I don't think they have to be identified publicly per se, but I think there has to be at least internally some kind of leadership protocol, whatever that is. That's something that has to be decided amongst them. Right. And because otherwise you end up with all of this chaos, confusion. What is the plan? What is the strategy that we're going to follow? Because there could be 12 strategies. Right. But if we're going to be effective, then we got to agree on which strategy is first, which strategy is second, which strategy is third. And we have to be servant leaders so that we're not concerned with whether my strategy is before your strategy.
We have a question from Matthew Dorfman, also from Half Hollow Hills High. How would you feel if legislation were passed to provide or to give reparations to African Americans?
Is that a setup question?
Well, Matthew is that? Matthew.
I should ask Matthew. What does he think?
That's Matthew back
Where's
there.
Matthew?
Where is Matthew?
Matthew.
Matthew back there.
What do you think, Matthew? Huh? I said, what do you think? Very good answer.
For those who didn't hear, Matthew expressed that he thinks it's a complicated issue, and if I may, that there are a number of different elements that might feed into how you sort of approach that sort of issue.
And what I would say, and I agree with you, it's very complicated. It was less complicated in 1970.
Yes.
We are a much more pluralistic society, much more diverse, and it would just create all kind of challenges at this particular point. My father did say, though, during his life, that when you have done something against a person for so many years, as has been done with African Americans, then you also have to do something for those individuals, because much of the problems that we are faced with, particularly in African American communities, comes from the history of slavery and Jim Crowism and segregation that we've inherited through generations. People say, well, the conditions may be different, but there's psychological things that have transferred from generation to generation, and changing and shifting those mentalities. And there's systemic things that have continued through generations. I mean, the reality is, even though black and white might sit together, Asian, Latino may sit together in this particular audience, there's a lot of systemic racism that we have not addressed in America. So if my father was sitting here today, he would reflect back on his statement about something for, and probably would agree that certain provisions should have been made and probably should be made today. Because if we still have this great gap, this great disparity, how are we going to ever overcome it? It will be 3, 4, 5 more generations from now. So we have to do something to kind of speed that up, to kind of equal the playing field, because it has not been equal. It's like we started behind in a race, and we've been forever catching up. And not because we didn't have the capacity to run the race, it's because we had so many barriers placed in our way from the very beginning. I mean, enslaved, we gave free labor. We're the only who have given free labor in this nation. And we've got to deal with that. How do we address that, through time? And so I agree with him. It is complicated, and we have to look at how do we make up for these challenges so that it doesn't feel like it's discrimination against other communities, although other communities have had forms of reparation.
Indeed.
Our next question comes from Avina Lomas, Progress High School, and also a first-year student here at Hofstra, Brianna Flynn. You kind of touched on it a little earlier, but they said, what is the one challenge that you see, the largest challenge that you see facing leadership in our society, the one challenge?
Well, I think we lack leaders who have the courage and strength of character to stand on principle. I think too many leaders compromise in the face of being popular and accepted and embraced by a group or a party. And it's unfortunate. And I encourage everybody, when you have a chance, to look at my father's interview with Mike Douglas on YouTube, very powerful interview. And he was asked a question about his relationship with President Johnson. As you may or may not know, in 1967, my father officially came out against the war in Vietnam. And many people did not want him to speak out against the war because President Johnson had been very friendly and somewhat accommodating to the civil rights community in terms of their issues. And they felt that this would put a strain on that relationship. And so my father was heavily criticized by many of his colleagues. And it was a very lonely time and place for him. But through my mother's encouragement, she had already been involved in the peace movement for years, even before she met my father. She encouraged him to speak out. She said, you know, the peace movement needs your voice. And so when he spoke out, obviously it caused some of those friendships to become strained. Many people turned against him. And now you had him situated where there was a tension between he and President Johnson. So Mike Douglas asked him, are you concerned, basically, about, you know, falling out of favor with President Johnson? And my father's, the essence of my father's answer was that, no, I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned with falling out of favor with what is, with my conscience and what is truth and what is right. He said, I'd much rather stay in favor with that than to concern myself with people who may not understand the positions that I take. That kind of leadership, strength of character, ability to have the courage to stand in a very controversial place is lacking today. And I think it's the source of many of our problems in our society. So those of you in this audience who are leaders and aspire to leadership, you know, I encourage you to really embrace what we have been taught by my father as the first principle of nonviolence, which is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. Be a courageous leader, not just bold. Donald Trump is bold. I wouldn't necessarily say courageous, but he is bold because it takes more courage to speak in ways that challenge people's positions and call out the truth with dignity than it does with insult.
Dennis Bellin from Alfred E. Smith High School, he has a very practical question, I imagine. And he's just wondering, what advice can you offer us as young aspiring college students about college education?
Well, I would say, let me say this. My father said, intelligence alone is not enough. Intelligence plus character is the true goal of education. And so to round out your character as you are aspiring to become a college student, I think it's very important that you not just become consumed in the academic side of your educational experience, that you enhance that by identifying with and connecting with causes that you are attracted to or may be passionate about. That you spend some time looking for people who can mentor you through your experience. So you're not just in this college life alone. And finally, I would say that you go beyond just what you get in the classroom, because there's only so much we're going to learn in a classroom setting. That you really take serious whatever it is you feel called to do in this life. And I say called because your true fulfillment is not going to come by just identifying a career because it'll pay a certain amount of money. That's hollow. You want to find something where you can feel a sense of fulfillment, and the gifts and the talents that are inside of you can be shared with the world, and money follows that. And so I would say that you find every opportunity you can to soak up whatever it is in that area, as well as doing internships. Don't always look for internships that pay. Because whenever you go into a situation and you're there to learn and to grasp as much as you can, people are watching that. They're watching how you serve, how you're there to really learn. I have an intern in my office, in fact, right now, who's a student at Spelman College. And she started out in a non-paid position. Well, now, a year and a half later, she is a paid staff member because I saw her dedication, I saw her commitment, and she didn't just come in there to spend time and fulfill hours and just say I was at the King Center. She really got in there. She took the initiative on certain things that nobody had to nudge her or push her or force her. She was very observant. I'm pushing her now to learn to ask more questions, though, because sometimes you can observe things and not quite understand why a person made a particular decision. So it's good to inquire so that you know all the factors that went into that decision. And so that's what I would say to those aspiring college students.
Okay, our next question comes from Glennon Rollins as well, again from Progress, and Maria Calderon. What's your take on the new state voter ID requirement in relationship to the civil rights movement?
You know, I've had, mixed feelings on all of that. In the first place, I do think in the South in particular that we have a long way to go. Racism is very much alive in the South, and particularly outside of like Atlanta, the main progressive city. But when you go to other areas of Georgia, it is very much present. And so I think there are these efforts to create barriers to the poll and to strengthen, I guess, one party's representation, or maybe both parties, who knows. However, I do think that those of us who situate ourselves in the civic community should try to create an opportunity where, and even in the faith community, where we can help and assist those who do not have IDs get IDs. Because while we're fighting against that, in the meantime, time is passing, and those laws are being put in place. And so what are we going to do in the meantime? Are we going to miss another election cycle, or are we now going to do what's necessary and make those sacrifices to ensure the elderly and the impoverished can get those IDs? Those are my mixed feelings. I mean, I do think that it's an effort to kind of put those barriers in place, but I also think we have to make efforts to ensure that those who would have a more difficult time with these IDs, in particular, are able to get them.
At the beginning of your response, you mentioned those in the faith community, and Diary de la Cruz, first-year student at Hofstra, wanted to know, is your faith as strong as your vision?
Honestly, most times not. It's very difficult being the daughter of a global leader who has had more influence in his death than in his life. Just as a average human being, all of us, or at least most of us, probably aspire to do as well or better than our parents. We want to exceed their accomplishments. Well, how do you do that if you're the daughter and even the sons of Martin Luther King Jr.? It's impossible. And I mean, a person who's changing the world in death as we speak. That's just great. So what happens to me is it's hard for me to envision small dreams. I mean, I think at the level that he thought, the global change and wanting to affect the world that way. And I'm like, God, that's just crazy because, I don't have that kind of faith. I have that kind of, vision, dream, but now the faith that it is needed to bring it to pass, it wavers quite often. And it wavers especially when I hear I encounter individuals who are constantly talking about your dad, your dad, your dad, your dad, your dad, and I said, well, shoot, I just need to get in line with my dad and just continue to perpetuate his work.
Indeed. Haley Simon from Half Hollow, and this question also came from Cope. You mentioned your father, and they both wanted to know, when you were growing up, were you aware of your father's influence? And they had a second part, did you lose any friendships because of this?
Yeah, no, I was pretty much sheltered. I was 5 when my father was assassinated. In fact, I turned 5 7 days before he was assassinated. So I was oblivious to everything that was going on in our household. I was probably the only child who did not face any kind of racism, any kind of insults. And so, you know, I didn't know of anything. You know, I probably ended up with more friends as a result, because, you know, once he was assassinated being 5 and then moving into elementary school, you know, it was like, you know, Dr. King's daughter. So his fame, even though he died one of the most hated men in America, you know, there still was a fame element to it, because now with the death, you know, the popular element, should I say. And so when I went to school, there were more people interested in knowing Bernice, or at that time I nicknamed being Bunny, so that they could know more about Dr. King and how is it living in their life. So I would say I probably gained friends more than lost friends.
And we also had a question from Quentin Thompson from Bay Shore, and also came from Copeg and Brentwood High School as well. Has your father's life and his actions as a civil rights leader impacted the way you live your life?
Definitely. I mean, especially since becoming the CEO of the King Center. I am a diehard nonviolent 365 person. I believe it's the only way and the best way and the most excellent way to live our lives. And so, you know, I've gained so much more respect for my father and his work leading that institution. And now it's like I just want to get it to as many people as possible. To me, he is, next to Jesus Christ, first and foremost for me, he is the greatest leader of all times. And I aspire to be half of who he was, because he was just, to some extent, sometimes I think he was the perfect leader. Not that he didn't have challenges and issues. He got depressed from time to time and wanted to give up from time to time. And my mother would nudge him and say, you know, the movement needs you, needs your voice, it needs your leadership. But just the way in which he looked at the world and he saw people and his demeanor, he was a very strong and settled person. It was very difficult to ruffle his feathers. I mean, he really was nonviolent. I mean, really. When somebody stabs you, as he was stabbed in 1958, and your first thing is she okay, the woman who stabbed him? I don't know if I could do that. I would be focused on my pain. He was not even focused on his pain. And he wants to know if she's okay. When the gentleman in Selma came up and hit him, you know, he wants to know, is that person okay? Who does that? I mean, that's his first impulse. I mean, we may get to that, you know, because I'm committed to it. I'll get to that, but I'm not sure I'll start at that place. So, I mean, when you're talking about a leader who's congruent with their message and with their platform, that was Martin Luther King Jr. 100%. And so he's who I aspire to be like.
Dr. King, if it's all right with you, we'd like to take one or two questions from Hofstra students in the audience. If there's a student or two, would you mind stepping up to the microphone? We are quickly running out of time, so if you have a question, and please keep it brief and to the point.
Hello, my name is Joy Jones. Ms. King, in regards to your intern, you said that you encourage her to ask more questions. What questions do you think we're not asking as a community that we should be?
When you say community, are you speaking of what community?
I guess specifically, in general, minorities as a whole.
Wow, that's a deep question. I've never thought about that. What questions are we not asking? I need to think about that for a second. I'm going to go to this question, then I'm going to think about that while I'm thinking about her question too. Wow.
The issue of voting and the IDs, are there any hopes you have for the upcoming election or any worries that you have?
Yes, we all worried.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I'm really concerned about the future of our nation in terms of leadership at that level. I think until we have these caucuses in January, we really don't know what's going to happen. It's really scary right now where we are as a nation. And I'm worried that we don't understand that it's important now to really hone in on our social issues, because I think we are going to end up like self-destructing. I mean, most countries fall not because of external threats. It's usually internal decay. And every civilization that has been known to man has risen and fallen. We're kind of just right there. And we have an opportunity to overcome it, but we've got to shift our focus and our priorities. And I'm not sure we're going to do it. And I'm not sure how things are going to turn out in the election, and so I'm worried about that. However, I always remain hopeful because there's enough of a remnant in this country that is not asleep, that is very much awake and is pressing constantly about, these issues. My father calls them the triple threats of poverty, racism, and militarism, which we don't address enough in our country, militarism. And so those are just some of my thoughts about this upcoming election.
It's just time for just one more question.
I still got to come back to her question.
Please.
Speaking of the election, you ever think about running for president?
Never. The last time I had that thought, I was about 9 or 10. And then I grew up, got my senses, and realized, oh no, that's a whole nother world. Wow, where's that young lady that asked me that question?
There she is.
Do you sit up at night thinking about that kind of stuff? I don't know if I can come up right now with the questions we should be asking. But I do think that we need to be much more assertive with our leaders in terms of accountability. I think too many people who are in places of leadership in the faith community are getting away with things. Too many in the political arena and in the corporate arena. We have yet to deal with how corporate America really runs America and how that's impacting our daily lives. And so they're kind of sliding on a daily basis from their responsibility, not just to financially give back, but to even allow some of their employees to give their time in service to community. How about a corporation who literally pays some of their employees to do work in a community as a part of what they do on a daily basis or a weekly basis? I think it can make a substantial difference in our communities, especially in our schools. And so I would say that issue is the whole issue of accountability and responsibility that we all have to these pressing social issues and to each other, because at the end of the day, it's really about how we see each other and how we treat each other behind, quote unquote, what we call issues. And if you have the wrong foundation and the wrong philosophy in life, it will determine whether or not you treat that person with dignity and respect, and you have them in mind as we are, creating policies. Because oftentimes we create policies without regard to the whole and without being sensitive to certain communities.
Dr. King, would you care to make any closing remarks as we sort of bring our discussion to an end here?
No, I mean my only remark will be, because I'm a King fanatic, not just by birth, but I've just come to have a lot of respect for my parents. I would challenge you to really learn a little bit more about my mom.
Yes.
Everywhere I go now, I find myself saying a little bit about her, because she's been gone now in January 10 years. And most people don't really know that the reason Dr. King has achieved his iconic stature is because of the commitment and the dedication she had in carrying his legacy forward. I call her the architect of the King legacy. She was the one to kind of shape who he would be for our world. I mean, he did a lot, but somebody had to give definition to all of that and had to champion that on a daily basis. And she met a lot of resistance from the beginning. Many people wanted her to stay at home and just raise her children and that be it. But she felt an incredible calling on her life to really institutionalize his legacy. And if you think about it, she's done an incredible job, because everywhere across the world, people are drawing and extracting things from the work of Dr. King. They're being inspired in their movements by his words and by the work. And although it's not his only speech, in my opinion, it's not necessarily his best presentation, I Have a Dream has become the most, not one of, it is the most known speeches in the world. Literally. You probably can't think of any other speech that people know all across the world that they can recite aspects of consistently. Now, you might be able to find music that way, but not a speech that has become so iconic from a global sense. And I attributed that to her work, her dedication, and I'm looking forward in the next few years, people becoming more and more familiar with her, as we begin to do more things around her life and her legacy as a person. She was not made by Dr. King. She was already an activist when she met him. She already had certain passions, and the movement just happened to awaken and give opportunity for those things for her. And so she didn't stand behind him, she stood beside him. And I say every day that not only was she the wind beneath his wings, she was often his wings. When they got clipped, she had to be there to help him to continue to soar. And so please, when you get an opportunity, just study about her. We'll be releasing in 2017 posthumously her memoir, and hope you will pick up a copy of that at the time.
Absolutely. Dr. King, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here
Thank
today.
you.
I ask the students, please join us in showing our appreciation for graciously sharing your time. Thank you so very much.